Part 263. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2626. Man Bao checked the list one by one and made sure there was nothing wrong before exhaling. After signing his name on the list, he handed it over to Dr. Duan, and instructed, close the box and stick a seal, be careful, and then going out one day, don't make a problem at this time. Medical assistant Duan should get off after taking it. Man Bao rubbed his neck, only to feel that the pain in his neck was a little better. She turned to pack up and prepare to leave the palace. At this time, it was almost dark, and if they didn't leave the palace gate was closed, and they had to stay in the palace. At this time, Bai Shan also finished the documents that need to be delivered, and he handed the cut documents to Mr. Fang. After Mr. Fang checked it, he signed it, and smiled with him. I'm on duty tonight, Mr. Bai, go out of the palace. If you don't leave now, you won't be able to leave in a while. Bai Shan looked out at the sky and nodded, but he was not in a hurry to leave, but accompanied Mr. Fang to file the signed documents before turning around and leaving. When Master Sun, who was on duty with Master Fang, saw it, he smiled and said, Master Bai is cautious, but it's not that you can't even trust me, right? Master Fang smiled and said, this is also a rule. There is nothing wrong with doing things according to the rules. After leaving the small shift room on duty, Bai Shan looked left and right. Seeing no one, he picked up his robe and ran out. When he met someone, he slowed down, but his footsteps were also fast, and only his toes passed by. The small classroom of the Taiji Hall was not close to the palace gate. He ran and walked quickly. The two ways were interchanged, and he arrived in front of the right path within 2/4 of an hour. He saw the palace gate from a distance, and in the dark he saw a familiar person. Bai Shan couldn't help but ran 2 steps quickly. Seeing the guard at the gate of the palace turning his head sharply, he could only slow down and sprint, not daring to run again. The guards of the Imperial Army stared at Bai Shan with piercing eyes, with the intention of slashing him if he did something wrong. But their faces were serious, but their eyes couldn't help glancing at each other. The guard who was checking Zhou Man's medicine chest even said, Lord Zhou, look back. Man Bao turned his head and looked back, seeing Bai Shan is rushing towards here, his eyes lit up immediately, he waved his hand and shouted, Bai Shan, hurry up, hurry up. The guard scolded her, silence. Man Bao immediately closed his voice and said softly, the palace gate is about to close, hurry up. Guard. Bai Shan reached the gate of the palace with his front foot, and heard a slam on his back foot, and immediately a guard said loudly, the time is up, close the door. Man Bao took Bai Shan's hand and pulled him out. Bai Shan was so tired that he took a deep breath and raised his arms to let the guards look at him, but he didn't have anything outside. The guard waved him away. The two stood 3 steps away and watched the palace gate slowly close. Half of the guards were locked outside like them. Well, they were the gatekeepers. Bai Shan wiped the sweat on his forehead and said, if it were other adults today, then I would have to spend the night in the palace. Man Bao asked, have you packed your things? Bai Shan nodded, okay, let's go first tomorrow, where is your Thai hospital? Man Bao said happily, we are also going first, but I have to accompany your majesty, so I can't go with the convoy of the Thai hospital. Bai Shan said, it's all right, I'll go check it out first, and see where it's fun and where it's cooler. Man Bao nodded again and again. The guards glanced at them and asked, the 2 adults are not leaving yet. The 2 turned their heads and grinned at them, it's hard work, the guards. So they walked away holding hands. The guards who were not very hard at first, but felt that it was really hard at this time. Daji rushed forward in the carriage, picked up the 2 and then went home. At this time, the sky was already dark, and after leaving the imperial city for 2 squares, one by one lanterns were lit. Many people were walking on the street, and the curfew would not be until an hour and a half. It's lively time. Bai Shan asked her, "Are you hungry?" Man Bao shook his head, "I've been too busy today, but I don't want to eat any more." Bai Shan said, "Then let's go home and eat some soup." It was only when they entered the house that Zibing and Julan greeted them and said, "Sir, Madam, I'm calling you from there, sir." The cake asked, "Sir, have you eaten?" Man Bao said, "Not yet, you can go to the kitchen and pick up some random things and send them to Mr. S yard. We will eat at Mr. S place." The cake slid down and bowed away. The two followed Julan to the husband and asked, "What is the teacher looking for from us?" "Sir didn't say, but it doesn't take much for Mr. to eat dinner. The old lady is still thinking about whether she has a bad appetite. Should she hire a doctor?" Julan smiled and said, "Later, Miss Ru went over to take a look and said that it's not a big deal." Mr. Zhuang's study was lit up, and Mr. Zhuang was sitting at the table writing something. When he saw them, he beckoned, "Come forward." The two stepped forward. Mr. Zhuang looked at Julan, and Julan bowed and stepped back. Then Mr. Zhuang tapped the paper on the table and said, "Come and have a look." The two of them looked at it, confused. What did Mr. write this? Strangely, seeing the names listed above, they seemed to be people they didn't like very much. Mr. Zhuang said, "These are all people who may resent and hate you." Bai Shan and Man Bao were surprised, so many. After a while, Mr. Zhuang said, "Look, have you missed anyone?" Bai Shan picked up the list and looked at it carefully, and asked, "How did you remember to list this, sir?" His scalp was a little numb. "Although we may not have a good relationship with the people on this list, we shouldn't have to take a small notebook to write down people, right?" "Mr. Zhuang, what are you thinking about?" "I list it so that you can know for yourself. If you encounter unreasonable suppression and malice in the future, it may be done by these people." Bai Shan couldn't help but look serious. "Sir, is something wrong?" Mr. Zhuang gave a rolled-up portrait to the two of them and said, "This is from Yao Chen before dark." He briefly summarized what Yao Ji said today. The man named Wan Dong is not necessarily his real name, but his face will never change. You should ask someone to check and see if you can find out who it is. Mr. Zhuang said, "It's been too long since then. Originally, Chen Fulan and I disagreed, and no one could be trusted, but I have a letter that Yao Ji wrote to me back then, and the letter told the whole story, which is a little better. But if Yao Ji came out to testify in person, saying that the poem was written by Chen Fulan, then the letter in my hand would be of little use," said Mr. Zhuang. "Even if this matter can be finally found out, the plausible rumors will also spread. For a period of time, my reputation was hampered, and it was difficult for me to continue working in the officialdom." Mr. Zhuang smiled slightly and said, "But it's nothing. I have a bad reputation. I'm getting old. Even if I resign, it's not a big loss, but it's very bad for the two of you." Bai Shan, "Good risk. I almost have to stay in the company to work overtime. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2627. In this era, the master is the same as his father. He is the master of Bai Shan and Zhou Man. Just like their father, his reputation is bad. As his disciple, not only Bai Shan and Zhou Man, but also Bai Erlang will be affected. Bai Erlang is okay, he has no ambition in his career, just be his concubine, no one will trouble him. But Bai Shan and Zhou Man, as long as they are still in the officialdom, they will always be criticized for this. This is what Mr. Zhuang worries about. Bai Shan squeezed the list in his hand tightly, his face was a little cold. "Sir, don't worry, I will solve this matter." Man Bao also comforted Mr. Zhuang, "We are not afraid of shadows, why should Mr. be worried?" Mr. Zhuang looked at his two disciples with a smile, nodded slightly and said, You have all grown up now. They are comforting him in turn. Mr. Zhuang smiled and said, it's not that I'm worried, I'm just a little worried. I also want you to know what to do and be prepared. If someone really criticizes it in the future, you can face it calmly. Zibing and Mei brought the food over, and the three stopped talking. Bai Shan put the portrait and the list in his arms, and smiled with Mr. Zhuang. Let's eat first, sir, it's not good to eat dinner, do you want to use some with us? Mr. Zhuang smiled and nodded. The young couple accompanied Mr. Zhuang to eat before returning to the main courtyard. Man Bao took out Wan Dong's portrait and looked at it. After looking at it for a long time, she couldn't find such a person in her mind, so she asked Keek. Keek said, I haven't seen it. Bai Shan said as he changed his clothes, you must have never met him. Not only you, Bai Er and I, and the people around us have never seen this person. He said, they can find Yao Ji when they find someone. Obviously they are not ordinary opponents. Even so, they still have this caution. The person who went to Yao Ji must have never shown their face in front of us. Man Bao was curious, but who would treat us like this? She was puzzled, there's nothing wrong with us in government, is it just because of personal grievances that we take personal revenge? Bai Shan lowered his eyes and said, there are people like Lord Wei in this world, and naturally there will be no shortage of Hoji and others. If they can distinguish between public and private, there will not be so many disputes and grudges in this world. Speaking of this, he raised his eyelids and said, let's not say anything else, we can't make a distinction between public and private. Man Bao thought about it carefully, and he couldn't say anything against it. Bai Shan threw down his clothes and turned to take a shower, look carefully at the list, and circle the people I offended recently. Man Bao chased after the screen, leaned on it and asked, why did you offend the person? Bai Shandao, it must be me, there may be many people in this world who hate you, but none of them will use such tortuous means to harm you. You are an imperial doctor, and there are better ways to harm you. However, the well-known genius doctor has more experience than Xiao Yuanzheng in some diseases, and those who hate you have to keep 2 points of affection, and they may beg you in the future. Man Bao, husband and wife are one body, wouldn't it hurt me if it hurt you? Bai Shan smiled and said, you are an imperial doctor, and you are a husband and wife. In the future, the imperial hospital will ask you to see the enemy's family. Will you not see it? Going further, can we find out who did it? Man Bao was startled, can't find out. Bai Shandao, there is a high probability that it will not be found out. Anyway, if I were to do this, the Wandong I was looking for must have nothing to do with me, or even someone who has no intersection on the bright side, even if I find it. As long as he doesn't speak, he can't find the person behind him. Then do we still check? Check it out, Bai Shan said with a smile, this is just my speculation. What if we meet a stupid person, or the other party is not secretive and happens to reveal his whereabouts? Always check down to get more clues. Know the truth. Bai Shan was not in a hurry. Yao Ji came to the capital, and they had to wait for the results. During this time, they should not do more actions to avoid superfluous. Bai Shan pondered while soaking in hot water, but he didn't know if they would stare at Yao Ji. If they did, he should have known that Yao Ji had seen Mr. Zhuang by now, right? Man Bao waited for a long time and didn't see him come out, so he left the list he had already thought about and came over to look at him through the screen. Bai Shan looked up and met her twinkling eyes. He sat down calmly and asked, do you want to come in and wash together? Man Bao glanced at the tips of his red ears, and pouted, I don't want to wash your dirty water, come out quickly, I'll let Zibing and the others bring hot water over. Seeing that she was still pulling the screen, Bai Shan made a gesture to get up, but Man Bao shrank back. Bai Shan couldn't help laughing softly, put on his clothes and went out. After changing Man Bao to take a bath, Bai Shan glanced at the people she had circled, and couldn't help raising his eyebrows. He suppressed the list in his hand. Does Man Bao also think that the Zheng family and the nobles in Kizhu are more likely? Maybe even bigger, but they are not rivals yet. Bai Shan couldn't help but knocked on the table, thinking about how to break the game. There is only 1,000 days of thieves, and no 1,000 days of thieves. This can't be done. They will always find other things. They don't know who their opponents are, and passive defense is very suffocating. However, the corners of Bai Shan's mouth twitched slightly. The timing was a coincidence. As long as he dragged on for a while, he could jump out of this game. Bai Shan thought about it, glanced at the screen, took the portrait, got up and went around to the small study on the other side outside. I found the drawing paper, spread out the scroll, and stared at the person on the painting while grinding the ink. By the time Man Bao came out of the bath, Bai Shan had already transcribed half of the painting. Man Bao looked over with his head, and Bai Shan asked with a smile, "Does it look like it?" Man Bao nodded, "Like." Bai Shan said seriously while describing, "Go back and give the fifth brother and the others a portrait. Since they are in business, the fifth brother and the others may be able to find out. Daji will also look for it here. I will look for Tang Xuexiang again. He knows more people, and he is in Jingzhou Mansion, which is more convenient than us, and there may be news." Man Bao nodded, thought about it and then said, "How about I also ask the shopkeeper Zheng De?" Bai Shan smiled and said, "No, it's not good to find too many people. Since they are quiet, we are also quiet. They think they are dark and we are bright, but they don't know that they are equivalent to us at this time. It's clear." Seeing that he was well drawn, Man Bao was a little itchy for a while, so he took out a piece of drawing paper and spread it out. "I'll draw another one." Bai Shan was a little entangled, but in the end he didn't stop it. Forget it, after the big deal, he quietly drew another picture to replace it. Man Bao also learned to draw, but the 4 characters of Qin, chess, calligraphy, and painting were ranked last, and her skills were accidentally ranked last. It's okay to draw some simple flowers and plants, and they can catch the eye, but drawing people. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2628. But Man Bao lost a little self-knowledge on this point. She consciously painted it was okay. At a rough glance, the characters were still very similar. Man Bao put the 2 paintings together for comparison, and the bright smile on his face slowly disappeared. "Why do you feel like I've gotten fatter?" Bai Shan couldn't help but said, "This is not just fatter." Man Bao patted his palm down. "The facial features are unchanged, can't you tell that this is a person?" Bai Shan was spineless, and smiled to please, "I can see it, I can see it, its very image." The next day, Bai Shan quietly drew another one, and the one that Man Bao drew himself was hidden in the drawer. Wu Wulang and Daji didn't say much after taking the portrait, but Tang he couldn't help but ask, "Who is this person?" Bai Shanlu pondered for a while and smiled, "An old friend." Tang he raised his eyebrows, even the name might be a fake old friend. Bai Shan smiled and said, "The old friend who is not very friendly, please trouble senior." Only then did Tang he accept the portrait, nodding and saying, "I will let the people under my command pay attention." Bai Shan quickly got up and thanked him. As soon as he left, Tang he pondered, summoned his subordinates, and handed the portrait to him. "Send a copy to Chang'an County and Wanyan County, let them pay attention to 1 or 2, and don't make trouble." "Yes," the subordinate asked after a pause, "Sir, who is this person?" Tang he smiled and said, "An old friend who is not very friendly." The subordinates understood, and immediately let them go down to do it. The current magistrate of Chang'an County is the magistrate of Guo County. When Bai Shan and Tang He went to Kizhu, he still won this position. When he received the painting sent from above, he just glanced at it and handed it to his subordinate. "Check it out, Master Tang gave it." This kind of work with no deadline is not urgent. It is almost the same as the head of a few arresting officers to write down the person's appearance, and pay attention to it when patrolling the streets. If the person is in the capital, it may be found out in 3 or 2 months. If the person is not in the capital, there may be no movement for 3 or 4 years. So the magistrate Guo didn't take it too seriously. Today, most of the officials in the capital are very busy. Bai Shan and the others will leave the capital early for Yangzhou, while Man Bao will return to the imperial hospital after sending off imperial physician Zheng and the others. She will travel with the holy car tomorrow, along with the emperor, to go to Yangzhou to escape the summer were the empress, Mingda, and Princess Changjiao. According to Man Bao's own calculations, apart from the prince's family, most of the royal family accompanies the royal family, and half of the officials also go, and the two sides need to take turns. Because of the busy schedule, Man Bao didn't have time to send Bai Shan off. In fact, she didn't need to send him off. We could see him again tomorrow. Man Bao put away her medicine box, and said to Lu Sunyang, who was holding her stomach, "As soon as we leave, the Thai hospital will relax. The weather is really hot at the moment, so I told Xiao Yuan that when the time comes you can go to the imperial physician's office every day to order Mao. You don't have to come to the palace. It is inconvenient to walk a long way from the gate of the palace to the Thai hospital. The imperial physician's office can be reached directly by horse-drawn carriage." Lu Sunyang nodded in response, rubbed her stomach and asked, "Master, if I have a baby?" Man Bao waved his hand and said, "I'm discussing with Xiao Yuan Zheng. In the future, there will be more and more female doctors in our imperial medical office, not only at the imperial hospital, but also in the local medical office, so some rules have to be settled. My proposal: you will rest after July, and you will go to the Yamen when your child is older in June, but Xiao Yuan Zheng has not agreed to me, and the matter is being discussed." Lu Sunyang breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't really want to give up her career in the Taiyuan hospital, but she couldn't help feeling a little flustered because the imperial court hadn't come out with a system. Man Bao touched her belly and was very happy. "Take care of it, your fetus is in the right position, and you should exercise every day." Lu Sunyang responded. "Your life is similar to that of Lejun, so you need to pay more attention to Lejun. Yangzhou is not very far from the capital. Every day there are documents from Taiyuan Hospital from Yangzhou. If the two of you are uncomfortable, let them be. Tell me, I will find a way to ask for leave to come back, or find Imperial Physician Lu and Dr. Tao." Man Bao told them to come down one by one. Lu Sunyang took it all down. When the emperor travels, especially such a large-scale travel, it is natural that the Forbidden Army will clear the streets first. From the imperial city to the gate of the city, there are forbidden troops standing guard along the way. There were many people on both sides who came out to join in the fun. It was rare to see the emperor, and everyone still wanted to join in the fun and see what the emperor looked like. The emperor sat on the dragon, and the 6 horses rode side by side. The frame was hung with tulle to block the sun, but the wind could penetrate, much better than the stuffy carriage. The emperor lifted the gauze and waved to everyone with a smile. The people on both sides were so happy that they knelt down and greeted the emperor, wishing him good health and long life. Man Bao was wearing an official robe and followed behind on horseback with the accompanying ministers. She quietly raised her head and glanced at the position of the sun, feeling a little worried. At this speed, it must have been a while since they left the city, right? The sun in the summer is already very hot, and when it is noon. Man Bao raised his hand to wipe the sweat on his forehead and sighed, wondering if these elders would suffer from heat stroke. Anyway, she felt like she was going to suffer from heat stroke. The minister of the household on the side glanced at Zhou Man. The two were of the same official rank, so they were in the same row, and in front of them were the big men of the third rank. Taking advantage of the excitement, the minister of the household asked, "Why is Lord Zhou sighing?" Man Bao said, "For the warm and brilliant sun in the sky." Tobia Shiro. Yao Ji was squeezed into the crowd, and he was almost unsteady. The two grandsons supported him on the left and right to prevent him from falling. When the emperor's carriage passed by, they followed the crowd and got up. The noble people of Zuzii who passed by on horseback. Although Zhou Man's official robes are the same as everyone else's, with round necks and wide sleeves, and even the official hats are the same, but she is a woman, with a fair face and a slim waist. It is especially conspicuous among the fourth-rank officials of the 30s and above. Many people saw her at a glance. Yao Ji's family too. Yao Dalan couldn't help but say, "This one should be the imperial Dr. Zhou that the tea house has been talking about these days. Why is she wearing a deep crimson official robe?" Yao Erlang said, "Brother, you didn't go to the tea house yesterday. Mr. Storyteller has already said that she has sealed the township owner and has been promoted to the 4th grade editor of Chongguan Museum." Yao Dalan was taken aback for a moment, editing, "The highest is only the 4th grade, right? Yeah, many people say that if she is promoted again, unless she wants to leave the Chongguan Museum, she can only add a false title, or directly become the owner of the Chongguan Museum." Yao Dalan, how is this possible? The current owner of the Chongguan Museum is Kong Jiju. If his successor does not have the knowledge of Kong Jiju, how can he convince the public? Yao Ji withdrew his gaze from Zhou Man and restrained his two grandchildren, "Keep your voice down, and don't arbitrarily discuss court officials." Yao Chen on the side was also greatly impacted, "Father, that's Uncle Zhuang's eldest disciple, right?" "Well," Yao Ji responded lightly and said, "his eyesight has never been bad. I'm going to take my dad to the hospital for a checkup tomorrow, so I have to save a chapter tonight. I won't add any more, I'll continue in a few days. See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2629. The speed of the team out of the city gate is faster, but because of the many frames, it can't go any faster no matter how fast. Man Bao took out a bag of water from the horse's waist, twisted it open, took a sip, and sighed again. The Shilang adults on the side also swallowed their saliva and took out the water bag to drink water, but for some reason, Lu Shilang always felt that the water Zhou Man was drinking was different from theirs, so he stared at her water bag. When Man Bao saw it, he said, "This is tea made with honeysuckle, does Shilang Lu want to drink it?" If Zhou Man were not a woman, Lu Shilang would also nod, but she was, so Lu Shilang just smiled and shook his head. Man Bao remembered it in his heart, and when he walked further, he left the team and ran forward for a while to find Princess Mingda's frame. Bai Erlang and Mingda were sitting together, the carriage was too slow, the sun was bright and boring, so he was dozing off a little at this time. The frame was knocked, he raised his head, and seeing that Mingda seemed to have just woken up, he lifted the curtain to look. Man Bao rode a horse and walked beside the carriage and asked him, "Where are you going to bring?" Bai Erlang pointed to the servant behind him and said, "Ask Ma Fuming." He suddenly didn't want to sit in the car anymore, so he greeted Mingda and asked the guard outside to get his horse. As soon as he got on the horse, he couldn't be more happy, it's better to ride a horse. Man Bao glanced at him silently, "If you can still say that in a quarter of an hour, I will respect you as a man." It didn't take 2/4 of an hour, and soon he couldn't take it anymore. "Why is the sun so hot? Isn't this normal? Otherwise, why did the emperor go to Beijing to escape the summer?" Man Bao said, "I'll go to Dr. Duan to get something, you ask Ma Fuming to go to the front of the camp and ask for a stove." Bai Erlang could only run errands for her. If Man Bao and the others traveled by themselves, they would not start a fire if they stopped at noon, but this is a holy drive. However, if Manbao and the others were to drive lightly, the distance between the capital and Yangzhou would not be outside at noon. Most of the people were dry food, including the following Shangshu and Shilang. The imperial army also set up a few stoves to warm up the meals for the nobles. Bai Erlang directly asked for a boiled tea. He listened to Man Bao and asked the cook to cook 2 buckets of thick sour plum soup at home, and then poured it directly into the pot, half a bucket at a time. After boiling, sprinkle some dried sweet-scented osman thus from Man Bao, pour into a bucket full of ice. Bai Erlang stood aside and watched, seeing the dark red soup falling from the white ice. He couldn't help swallowing, this ice looked so delicious. He took a spoon and asked for a piece of it, but was beaten by Man Bao, who came over. Bai Erlang, why did you come so quickly? Man Bao, guess what? Bai Erlang ignored her. The maids mixed the soup and ice in the bucket, and the ice melted quickly, then covered the bucket and sent it to the emperor first. After a while, the accompanying officials were also given a slightly icy sour plum soup. Not to mention, the sun was shining right now, and drinking a bowl of it was really healing. When they were done, the servants and the maids gathered together and sipped the herbal tea that had not been boiled for a long time. It was also a good product to relieve the heat, but the taste would not be as good as the sour plum soup that adults use. But at this time, they can still drink medicinal tea to relieve the heat, and they are already very satisfied. Half of the accompanying maids had a car and followed from a distance, and the other half followed the frame by their legs. So it's more of them to lose water. After serving the emperor, Gu Zhong came over to ask for boiled water to make tea, and the servant served a bowl of medicinal tea specially iced. After taking a sip, he shook his head, "It's better to drink it warmly, you are superfluous." The waiter was startled and wanted to kneel. "Forget it," Gu Zhong waved his hand, "it's not a big deal, is it enough?" Enough, not only the little ones, but the imperial army also drank a bowl of medicinal tea. Gu Zhong nodded slightly, "Lord Zhou is more careful, you should be more careful, it is rare for someone to remember us, the lowly people. If someone is caught in the heat, they will go to the medical assistant Duan, don't be like in previous years, just a long way, it's going to be a few more lives to die." The servant bowed down. The speed of the frame was slow, and it was almost dusk until they arrived at the Yangzhou palace. The emperor and the nobles went directly to the palace that had been arranged, and Manbao didn't have to be tired. After exhaling a breath, he invited a servant to ask, "Am I in a yard alone, or with Master Bai from Zhongshu province?" The servant smiled and said, "Master Bai already lives in Master Zhou's courtyard." Manbao was satisfied, nodded, and followed the servant to her yard. This time, the emperor gave favor to his ministers and officials during the summer vacation, so officials of the 4th rank and above were allowed to bring their families. There are not many officials above the 4th rank in the court, and only half of them come, so one person and one yard can still afford it. I don't know if it was because Bai Shan was from Zhongshu province, or because of Manbao's particularity, the yard they shared was next to Lord Wei's yard, not very far from the Changkai palace where the emperor lived. Further out is the residence of the servants. Yin Li lives in the interior, the place away from the 2 courtyards, is diagonally opposite. Yin, who has nothing to do or wear a big hat, came over, and happened to meet Manbao, who was about to enter the door. When the two of them saw each other's eyes lit up, Manbao stepped forward and said with a smile, "I'm looking for you during the lunch break. They said that you came one step earlier, why did you come in later than us?" Yin he smiled and said, "I'll wait at the foot of the mountain when I arrive, and I won't come in until all of you have entered." Seeing that he was in good spirits, Manbao nodded and said, "I'll clean up first, and we'll have dinner together when Bai Shan comes back." Yin nodded with a smile. Bai Shan was obviously not free for a while, so Manbao entered his small courtyard, and the courtyard was the first one he entered, but there were 3 rooms in the middle, and people could live in both the east and west. She pushed open the door of the main room, and seeing that the cleaning inside was fairly clean, she took off her official hat and hung it on it, and let out a long sigh of relief. Today, she was obviously just riding a horse, but she was so tired. She sat for a while, and the servants and luggage who fell behind finally came up the mountain through inspection. Daji and the 2 guards were carrying 2 boxes, while Zibingmei had a heavy burden on his back and in his arms, and came in behind one of the servants. Manbao heard the movement and went out, stretched out his hand to take the burden in Mei's arms, and said, "Didn't you just pack 1 box, why are there so many more things?" Mei said in a low voice, "This morning, the old lady came over to take a look after the lady went out. She felt that she had too few things, so she packed another box. So it almost missed the register." The list of family members and servants who followed the official was registered early in the morning, but the luggage was registered now. With a few boxes, I would remember all the baggage. Or else, all the big and small officials and subordinates in the capital are crazy busy today. Manbao felt the most relaxed was the emperor. However, she felt that the most relaxed emperor only sat down and took a sip of tea before receiving the offer. "I'm a lovely contributor, although there is only 1 chapter, ha 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 ha, see you at 8 o'clock in the evening." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2630. The book was sent by Bai Shan. They came to the palace one day in advance, not only to check the location of their office in the next 2 months, but also to divide the book that was sent, and give it to the emperor after approval. The emperor put down the teacup, picked up the top book, and opened it. Yin Li reported the situation of drought and heat in the Jiangyi region. The emperor felt that he was still thirsty, put down the fold and took a sip from the teacup and looked outside. "How are you packing?" Seeing that the emperor couldn't sit still, Gu Zhong smiled and said, "It's busy, do you want to go and have a look?" The emperor was hesitant. He took the book for a while, and found that he still couldn't calm down, so he dropped the book and said, Go out and see how everyone is tidying up, it's hot today, and the Ikings braved the scorching sun to relocate here, don't get tired." Gu Zhong smiled and served the emperor and got up to go out. Yangzhou Palace is not in Yangzhou City, but outside the city, in several continuous mountains. The mountains are densely forested, and the palaces are built along the mountains, winding up. The Emperor's Hall of Longevity is near the top of the mountain. Halfway up the mountain, it is very cool. As soon as he went out, the Emperor blew a cool breeze, and he couldn't help narrowing his eyes comfortably, which was too rare. In the Tai Chi Palace, whether you are inside or outside the house, you will sweat when you don't move, and when you move, the sweat is like rain. It was stuffy and hot, and it was unbearable. The emperor was refreshed, and he went back to find the queen. When he arrived at the door of the palace, he looked into the palace and saw that the maids were constantly coming and going. After thinking about it, it was too much trouble, so he said, "I don't want to. I've disturbed the queen, let's look elsewhere." So he walked away again. The emperor wandered around his longevity hall for half a circle, and saw the way down the mountain. At this time, the dusk was over, the clouds in the sky were gorgeous, and the sun had set for a little while. Among them, orange-red clouds seemed to be among the treetops under the mountain. So he pointed to the bottom and asked, "Wei Qing and the others live down there?" Gu Zhong bent down and said, "Yes, the adults all live at the bottom. Further down is where the 6 divisions of the palace are located, and at the bottom is the camp where the Forbidden Army is camped." The emperor nodded, then lifted his foot and went down. Go and see Wei Qing and the others. Mr. Wei is not there, he is working hard on the book that was approved yesterday." Bai Shan made an errand, and after leaving the Hall of Longevity, he stepped up to the palace below. Han Shangshu saw that the yard was noisy, and he rode a horse for another day, and his back was sore, so he turned around and walked out irritably. When he reached the door, he saw Bai Shan's clothes flying quickly past him. Han Shangshu opened his mouth. Bai Shan had already carried his clothes and ran forward. After running through the 2 yards, he happily opened the door and jumped in. Manbao. Han Shangshu didn't expect that Bai Sharan, who had always followed the emperor with a cold face, had such a side, so he could not help but slap his face. Manbao had already washed her face with cold water, wiped her neck and hands under the service of the cake, and before she had time to change into her official uniform, when she heard Bai Shan's voice, she stuck her head out of the window in surprise, happy. Said, "Are you back?" Manbao dropped the cloth towel and ran to Bai Shan's side, and couldn't help complaining, "It's so hot today." Bai Shan took her hand and said with a smile, "I expected it earlier." Qin Tianjian said early in the morning that these days are all scorching sun, and the heat is heavy, so people don't go out. You are following so many frames, the speed must be slow. He said, "I had someone make cheese yesterday, and I bought a bucket of ice cream with them. Now is the best time to eat it? I'll take you to eat it." Manbao's eyes brightened. He immediately left the housework in the yard, pulled him and said, "Go, where to eat? I'll take you to get it out." Daji was about to put down the broom and follow, but Bai Shan waved his hand and said, "Daji, you don't have to follow, it's in the palace, and there won't be any danger." Daji stopped and watched the 2 of them run out holding hands. Han Shangshu stood at the gate of the courtyard and stretched his waist, and he saw Bai Shan and Zhou Man both go out after he was halfway twisted. He stiffened and raised a smile to say hello, but the 2 of them didn't go this way at all, and walked straight to the other side. "Of course, I didn't see him either." Han Shangshu. He narrowed his eyes and watched the 2 of them walk away side by side. The courtyard door behind him was opened, and a young man came out and said, "Father, can I find Lu Yu and the others?" Han Shangshu turned around and glared at him, "What do you want to do with Lu Yu? You are not too young, can you know something? People younger than you can now be on their own and become a 5th rank and 4th rank official. Let's see what you are doing now." Achievement. Bai Shan pulled Manbao to turn into a small road, and went up along the road. Manbao couldn't help but stop and look back, and saw that the yard they lived in was below, but it happened to be hidden by mountains and rocks, obscuring the sight. She was amazed, "So there is still a path out here? Isn't it the Hall of Longevity where your Majesty lives?" "No," Bai Shan said, "go around here, it's right behind the Hall of Longevity. I saw it when I came up yesterday. This place is very hidden, but the road is well built and the scenery is good." He went up a step first, reached out to Manbao, pulled her up, and said with a smile, "There is a cold spring above, so I hid the ice bucket there." No way, at this time, the speed of ice melting can be slowed down, either a cold spring or a cellar. But Bai Shan felt that putting it in the cellar would contaminate it with a bad smell, so he was unwilling. There are several cold springs on the mountain where the Yongzhou Palace is located. Bai Shan pulled Manbao and finally came up when the sunset completely went down. A wooden barrel was soaked in a cold spring and tied to a nearby tree with a rope. Bai Shan took out the bucket, opened the lid, and inside was a large sealed bamboo tube. He opened the bamboo tube, took a basket from the tree, and sat on the stone with Manbao. He opened the lid of the basket, and there were not only bowls and spoons, but also dried plums and sweet-scented osman thus nectar he had prepared. Bai Shan dug up half a bowl of cheese, sprinkled her with some prunes and sweet-scented osman thus honey, and handed it to her with bright eyes like stars. "Try it." Manbao was stunned for a moment, and reached out to take it. "Why are you so well prepared?" Bai Shan pursed his lips and smiled. "Didn't you say that you've been busy with business for the past 2 years, and you're dreaming of a moment of leisure? I think this is considered leisure, right?" Manbao held the cheese, nodding with water in his eyes. "Forget it, Forget it. Bai Shan said, it's not good to be cold in summer, so you can eat half a bowl. I'll keep the rest for you and put it in the cold spring, so you can eat it tomorrow. Man Bao stirred the cheese and fed him a spoonful after mixing it well. Bai Shan smiled at her, opened his mouth to take a bite, and nodded, it's really good, you can try it. See you at 10 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2631. The two shared half a bowl of cheese, and in the dark watched the stars appearing one after another in the sky. The two of them cuddled together, leaning their heads against their heads and looking up, it's so beautiful. As the stars in the sky increased one by one, Man Bao couldn't help but let out a wow and pointed to the sky, is that Tianhe? Bai Shan was also stunned. It was not the first time they had seen stars, but it was the first time they had seen such a beautiful zeng. They only saw the stars filling the sky little by little. Among them, a ribbon with silver light was the most dazzling. 9 days poured down. He said blankly, it's really Tianhe. The impatient emperor standing behind the rock also looked up at the starry sky and stopped for a while. Bai Shan and Man Bao didn't speak for a while, they just looked up so quietly. Bai Shan was more interested in admiring this kind of beauty, but Man Bao was a little more amazed and curious. Keek, your world, is it in that Tianhe? Keek, not here. After a pause, it said, in a farther place. Man Bao didn't ask where he was, and he wouldn't say anything if he asked Keek, and she wouldn't be able to get there either. Instead, Keek was silent for a while and then said, host, someone is standing behind you. Man Bao's hair stood upside down in an instant. She turned her head stiffly to look behind her. Behind her was a cold spring with gurgling water, and the starlight reflected on the cold spring little by little. She swallowed and trembled. You, don't scare me. Bai Shan, who was leaning against her, was the first to notice what was wrong with her, took her by the shoulders, and asked, what's wrong with you? Man Bao grabbed Bai Shan's hand, and his courage returned, so he swept across the cold spring behind him, inch by inch. Where, is it a real person or a fake? Bai Shan couldn't hear what she was saying, but he could see her expression, so he stared at Lang Quan curiously. Keek, not in the cold spring, but behind the stone mountain. It simply said, it's your emperor, as well as the servant and 2 guards who are with the emperor. Anyway, the main system has seldom stared at it recently, and it doesn't mind providing this information to the host in a friendly way. When Man Bao heard that he was the emperor, he immediately pulled Bai Shan to stand up, patted his robe and said, let's go back, I'm hungry. Bai Shan was stunned for a moment, then nodded, okay. He washed the bowls and spoons in his hands in the cold spring, put them in a basket, covered them again, and hung them on a tree before walking down with Man Bao's hand. Under the starlight, the road went down one step at a time, and it was not difficult to walk. After a while, the two of them turned around a big rock and bent down. Bai Shan couldn't help but stop and look back. Man Bao was so scared just now. What's on it? Man Bao noticed that he had stopped, and hurriedly tugged at him. The two continued to go down, and after walking a long way, Man Bao felt that no one would hear it, so he let out a long breath and said, it's your majesty. Bai Shan, then why do we hide? Man Bao, I don't want to work overtime tonight. Bai Shan thought it made sense, so he pulled Man Bao down. The two cautiously descended the mountain and met Yin Li on patrol with the Imperial Army. Where is the use of the commander of the Forbidden Army to patrol in person? Are you still patrolling here? Bai Shan couldn't help but stop and bow to Yin Li. Yin Li stopped and squinted at the two of them. Where did you come from? Bai Shan pointed to the small road behind him and said with a smile, there is a small road on the mountain. There is a cold spring on the mountain. The scenery is very beautiful. We only came down from the top. Yin Li followed and searched for this road in his mind, and he found it after a while. This small road can bypass the Hall of Longevity, so he also arranged 2 guards at the pass near the Hall of Longevity. Guard. Emperor. Thinking of the emperor's disposition, Yin Li turned his head and instructed the guard, "Go and fetch the lantern." Bai Shan and Man Bao bowed and retired. Yin Li frowned as he watched them leave. These 2 are always smart, so they shouldn't be teasing him, but if His Majesty was above, how could the 2 of them come down by themselves? The guards quickly brought the lanterns, and at this time, the emperor instructed the 2 guards to bring up the wooden barrel and take out the sealed bamboo tube inside. He took the basket from the tree and said with a smile, "It's so hot, I won't be able to eat it until tomorrow, and the cheese has to be eaten fresh. Let's go back to the queen." Gu Zhong breathed a sigh of relief, and was about to turn around while supporting the emperor. The emperor pointed in the direction where Bai Shan and the others were leaving, "Going down from here, I was originally going to see the Ikings. Gu Zhong, if you hadn't had to hide behind a rock to watch the young couple show their affection, they would have been down the mountain long ago. But no matter where he wants to go, he can go anyway." Gu Zhong helped the emperor go down the mountain. It was still light when they came out, so they didn't bring lanterns. They didn't look like Bai Shan and Zhou Man walking down this road, and their eyes were good, so they walked down cautiously. Fortunately, after walking down for a while, I saw the light. The emperor stopped and narrowed his eyes slightly. Carrying the lantern, Yin Li led the people to turn around and came up. He ran into the emperor head-on, heaved a sigh of relief, and immediately saluted, "Your Majesty." "It's Yin Iking," the emperor smiled and beckoned, "You came just in time, I invite you to eat cheese." Yin Li. He took 2 steps forward, stood beside the emperor, and Gu Zhong protected him from left to right, asking him to go down the mountain. The guards below turned sideways, holding lanterns to illuminate the mountain road for the emperor. The emperor supported their men to the foot of the mountain, looked back and forth, laughed and said, "So this road leads to this place. Which yard do Bai Shan and the others live in?" Yin Li stretched out his finger to the yard not far ahead. The emperor stopped his voice and hissed, let's go to your yard, call Wei Qing and Han Qing, and I invite you to eat cheese. The bamboo tube is very big. Today, Bai Shan only dug up half a bowl, and there are at least 2 big bowls left. The emperor directly asked Gu Zhong to divide them half bowls. Cheese. Han Shangshu took a bite first, and said in surprise, "Yes, fresh and delicious Sai Sua Fu. Congratulations to your Majesty for being a good chef." The emperor smiled and said, "This is not made by the cook, but this cheese drink not only quenches thirst, but also moistens the teeth and cheeks. It is indeed a top grade, ha 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 ha." The emperor smiled cheerfully, "Especially if there is love in it, it is even more of the best." Yin Li had already guessed, but Wei Ji and Han Shangshu were at a loss. The emperor is quite regretful, but unfortunately Zhao Qiuagong is not here, otherwise he will definitely understand what he means. Yin He sat cross-legged on the couch, because the yard was small, he could hear what the people in the yard said. He frowned slightly, thinking the emperor's words were strange. He looked at Chang Shao. Chang Shao waved his hands again and again, but he did not dare to go out at this time. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 2632. Yin He leaned on the couch in frustration. If the emperor didn't come, he would go to Bai Shan and the others to play, because the emperor was here, and he couldn't go out. Bai Shan and the others will be stopped even if they find him. Chang Shao lowered his voice and comforted him, "Young master, don't be in a hurry, these days are still long, and I will go to young master Bai and Miss Man tomorrow." Daji closed the door and went back to report in a low voice, Master Yin picked up the people from the mountain, and now everyone is in Master Yin's mansion. Man Bao sighed, our cheese is definitely gone. Bai Shan reassured her, it's nothing, I'll let someone do it for you next time. On the first day of check-in, the movement of Yangzhou Palace didn't slow down until midnight. The tranquility in the mountains is different from the tranquility in the capital. In the capital's home, no matter how quiet it is, you can still hear the clock time every once in a while. But here, when it is quiet, everyone hears the sound of insects, especially there are fields at the foot of the mountain, and it is summer again, and the sound of frogs is one after another. Man Bao lay on the bed after washing up, turning his head to look at the closed window. Bai Shan also took a shower. He lifted the thin quilt and sat on the bed. He glanced at the window and said with a smile, there are many insects in the mountains. Cut it out to make a screen, so that the window is open, and those bugs can't fly in. Man Bao said, will it be too extravagant to use Yan Luosha as a screen window? No, when we go back, we will take it off and bring it back, and we can still use it when we get home. Bai Shan said, as long as something is useful all the time, instead of throwing it away after a while, it's not a luxury. Man Bao thought about it too, and readily agreed. Man Bao leaned in his arms and began to think of the emperor. Why do you think your majesty is hiding? If he doesn't hide, it's not impossible to treat him to a bowl of cheese. Bai Shan thought for a while and then said, every mortal has a desire to voyeurize, and his majesty is just a mortal. Man Bao looked up at him, you too. Bai Shan immediately said, that's why we need etiquette rules. It's basic etiquette not to peep at people, not to mention see no evil. Your majesty's actions are not authentic. If Master Wei and Li Shangshu know about it, they will definitely persuade him. The emperor naturally knew this, so he skipped Li Shangshu when he invited guests. Although he called Wei Ji had been busy with business before, and he didn't even know that the emperor had disappeared for a while, let alone guessing to so many things. So the emperor spent the night without any danger. The next day, the emperor walked around the Hall of Longevity with the empress in a refreshing mood, and then went to meet the courtiers after breakfast. The emperor's mental outlook is different from when he was in Taiji Palace. If he was like a wheat ear that lacked water and wilted when he was in Taiji Palace, then at this time he was like a lotus in full bloom, with a smile on his face. As soon as they met, Wei Ji's eyes rolled around the emperor's face, and then he took out the book and said, Your Majesty, this minister has an opinion on several instructions from Zhongshu province. Wei Ji squinted his eyes when he saw the papers piled up on his desk. Your Majesty, did you approve yesterday's papers? The emperor just remembered this, and immediately covered his stomach and said, the cheese I ate last night may have been too cold, and I have been feeling a little uncomfortable since I returned to the palace. Wei Ji expressionlessly closed the booklet in his hand. Really, I see that His Majesty's face is rosy and doesn't look sick. Why don't you ask Imperial Physician Zhou to take a look? Li Shangshu, who has been very dull today, heard the words and immediately said, Your Majesty's health is important, but it cannot be ignored. It is time to ask Imperial Physician Zhou to take a look. So the emperor had to send someone to invite Zhou Man. Man Bao was playing Wuqin 11 in the yard. When he finally finished his work and let out a slow breath, a servant came to invite her. Empress Dr. Zhou, what about Your Majesty's announcement? Man Bao was startled immediately. Has he eaten a bad stomach? The maid was also taken aback. How does Imperial Dr. Zhou know? Man Bao swallowed his saliva in a guilty conscience, and asked, How is Your Majesty's face, does it look serious? While asking, I asked Zibing to bring her medicine box. The inner servant did not see the emperor at all. He directly followed the instructions of the ancient inner servant to call someone, but when the ancient inner servant called him, his face was calm and he did not see anxiety, so he said, Yes, it should not be serious, Lord Gu is quite stable. When did Gu Zhong become unstable? Man Bao obviously didn't believe the little servant's judgment, so he took the medicine box and left. Mei chased out from inside, "Miss, don't you change your clothes?" Man Bao waved his hand indifferently, and has already followed the little maid to leave quickly. His eyebrows are on fire. What clothes should he change? Man Bao hurriedly rushed to the Taiji hall in plain clothes, because he ran in a hurry, and when he arrived at the Taiji hall, he was still a little unbalanced. Everyone who was sitting in the hall and continuing to discuss state affairs looked at her together. Man Bao was panting, "Your Majesty is not feeling well." She stared at the emperor's face, blinked, looked him up and down again, and then turned to look at the little maid who was chasing her in. Everyone followed her gaze to the little maid. The little maid suffered the unbearable gaze for a while, his knees softened, and he knelt directly on the ground, shivering. Seeing that he was shaking all over, Man Bao took a step to the left and stood in front of him. She put down the medicine box she was carrying, gave the emperor a deep bow, raised her head and asked, "I heard that your Majesty is not feeling well." "Ah. Oh, that's right," the emperor reacted and stretched out his hand to cover his stomach again. "I had a little pain just now, but it's fine now." "Wei Nu, Lord Zhou, let's take a look at your Majesty." "Li Shangshu, you can't avoid diseases and avoid doctors." Han Shangshu, the only one who knew the truth, and Yin Li, who knew the truth completely, remained motionless. Man Bao responded, looked at the ministers who were sitting still, then looked at the emperor, and asked, "Does your Majesty want to watch here, or?" The emperor got up immediately, "Let's go to the inner room." Gu Zhong immediately stepped forward with a smile to pick up the medicine box for Zhou Man. Man Bao thanked him, and followed the emperor to the inner room. Gu Zhong followed behind with a smile on his face, but before walking, he lowered his head and glanced at the kneeling servant, and said in a low voice, "What are you doing on your knees? Don't step back." As if receiving amnesty, the little waiter got up and went backwards. The emperor sat down on the soft couch behind the screen, Zhou Man sat on the small stool to check his pulse, and Gu Zhong went to brew 2 cups of tea, one for the emperor, and one for Zhou Man's almond tea. Apparently there was a lot of honey in it, but when I put it at Manbao, I could smell a honey fragrance. She couldn't help looking up at the emperor. The emperor smiled at her and asked meaningfully, "Zhou Qing, is my stomach okay?" Man Bao only had Xiao Yuanzhen's advice left in his mind, so he asked carefully, "Does your Majesty think it's a big problem?" See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2633. When it comes to the emperor's physical affairs, the living man will naturally follow. At this time, he is standing aside with a small notebook. Hearing that, he looks up at Zhou Man, and then turns to look at the emperor again. The emperor put his hand on his stomach and said, "I still feel a little bit of pain, but these are all minor problems, don't worry, some small things can still be done." Man Bao thought about what the little things could be. Is it a big thing or a small thing to sit and critique papers? Is it a big thing or a small thing to discuss with the courtiers? But she definitely couldn't go out hunting on horseback. She was sick and had to rest. She was sure it was a big deal. But Man Bao couldn't help peeking at the emperor. "His Majesty, did the old man think about this? Did he want to go hunting?" Mainly because she wanted to go a little bit. Man Bao was entangled, and simply pulled the emperor's hand again, feeling his pulse and thinking, "Your Majesty, do you have any other discomforts besides abdominal pain?" She felt that the emperor's excuse was not very good. She wanted to be lazy. It was human nature. She sometimes wanted to be lazy and not go to the government office. If the people around her were all imperial doctors and doctors, she would not know how to use the excuse of being sick to ask for help. "How many times are you on vacation?" Alas, she could understand the emperor, but she felt that she couldn't be too accustomed to the emperor, and what Xiao Yuan Zheng said might not be alright. Rest is fine, but taking too long a rest is not good. If there is something wrong with the stomach and intestines, then at least 3 days of medicine must be taken, then 3 or 4 days of rest, and the 7 days will pass. Man Bao hinted at the emperor with his eyes and asked him to find other excuses. It's a pity that the emperor didn't have enough tacit understanding with her. The two stared at each other. The emperor thought she was unwilling to cheat for him, so he was a little unhappy, and said angrily, "I still have shoulder pain, waist pain, back pain. It hurts everywhere, so you dare to say that I am not sick?" Man Bao's eyes lit up and said, "Your Majesty, you are overworked and caught in the heat. This is simple, and it will be easy to treat after I give you a careful inspection." Emperor, after realizing it, he seemed to have misunderstood, and he couldn't help but glance at Gu Zhong. Gu Zhong smiled slightly, stepped forward, and said, "How should Master Zhou check?" "Don't be too troublesome, I'll take a look at His Majesty's tongue coating, and then press on the painful spot." Man Bao excitedly asked the emperor to open his mouth to let her see the tongue coating. When she saw it, her smiling face froze and paused. After a while, he rolled up his sleeves and said, "Your Majesty is lying on my stomach to check and check." The emperor lay on the couch, and Man Bao stretched out his hand and pressed it on him a few times. When he pressed it on the back shoulder, the emperor let out a hiss. When Man Bao heard it, he moved the hand that he had removed and moved it back. After pressing it, he asked, "What do you think? It hurts here." Man Bao pressed down on several places and asked, "Where is it?" The emperor couldn't help crying out in pain, and Gu Zhong stepped forward anxiously. Man Bao's eyes narrowed, he withdrew his hand, and said to the emperor, "It's all right, I'll give you a prescription, I'll prepare an ointment for you, and have someone give you a massage or two. There are also imperial doctors and medical assistants who are good at massage in the imperial hospital." As for the medicine for the stomach and intestines, Man Bao had forgotten, and the emperor had also forgotten. He sat up on the couch and asked her with a frown, "Is this sick?" Man Bao nodded. The emperor frowned even more, "What's wrong?" "You have heat stroke." The emperor didn't believe it, "Is this heat stroke? And it's not hot today." Man Bao said, "You are suffering from heat stroke, and the time is not short, but it is not acute." She turned her head and asked Gu Zhong, "Has His Majesty lost his appetite these past few days, and the solar eclipse is less than 1/3 of what it used to be? You can't sleep well at night, but you're always thirsty, but you can't sleep without relief." Gu Zhong nodded again and again, extended his thumb and said, "Everything Master Zhou said is accurate." "That's the heat stroke." Man Bao paused and said, "Your Majesty needs to rest for a while. During this time, you need to spend less brains and thoughts, and you can't go out to sunbathe, let alone go out hunting, but you can stay in the palace. Go for a walk and relax, and move around appropriately." The emperor was still a little happy when he heard the front, but he was expressionless when he heard the back, and asked, "How long will this disease take?" Man Bao sighed, "You have to rest for at least a decade. It's not as good as gastrointestinal problems, at least 6 or 7 days is enough." The emperor lay directly on the couch, staring blankly at the beams of the roof. He didn't expect that he was lazy and actually found the disease. Man Bao got up after prescribing the medicine. "Your Majesty, rest first, I will prepare the medicine bag, I will come to moxibustion your body in a while, and I will send someone to massage your body in the afternoon." Having said that, he left. Kijulang watched silently, but the pen in his hand did not stop, and there was not much ups and downs, and he wrote them down plainly. Man Bao went out with the medicine box, and Master Wei immediately asked, "Master Zhou, how is your Majesty's health?" He was ready to scold for a while. No, it was to admonish the emperor. As a result, Zhou Man said, "Your Majesty needs to rest for a decade." Wei Ji frowned and looked at Zhou Man suspiciously. Not only Wei Ji, but also Yin Li looked at her suspiciously. When Man Bao saw it, he immediately leaned back and said in a loud voice, "Don't suspect me of cheating, this is absolutely true." Wei Ji slapped his cheeks. Could it be that the emperor still made a prophecy that he really had a bad stomach? Man Bao said, "Your Majesty is suffering from heat stroke." Wei Ji and other ministers. They breathed a sigh of relief, and then quickly asked, "How come you have heat stroke? I see that His Majesty's face is quite ruddy, it doesn't look like he is sick." "Yeah, it's hard to tell just by looking at his face and pulse without looking at the tongue coating. He hasn't gotten sick yet, so don't worry, I only take 2 pairs of the medicine I prescribed. If it's not serious, why should you rest for a 10-day? Man Bao said, "In order to cut off the root, and I think your Majesty needs to rest for a decade." Wei Ji rolled up his sleeves and stretched out his hand. "Come on, Lord Zhou, show me, how long do you think I need to rest?" Man Bao lifted Wei Ji's hand, and put the fingers of his right hand directly on his pulse. "Wei Ji." All the adults. When Man Bao touched it, he frowned slightly, then looked at Wei Ji's face. "Master Wei, let me see your tongue coating." Master Wei, he's sarcasm, doesn't he understand? When he reached out, she really took the pulse, right? Zhou Man stared at Wei Ji, forcing him to open his mouth with his eyes. Li Shangshu and Han Shangshu on the side both trusted Zhou Man's medical skills very much, and they persuaded, "Master Wei, why don't you let Master Zhou show you?" Wei Ji had no choice but to open his mouth to show her. Man Bao silently put down his hand and said to him seriously, "Sir, you need to rest for at least 1 month, and you shouldn't be too tired after 1 month." She said, "The spirit of a person is the essence, and the essence and blood are the foundation of the human body. The adults have already injured the root." The emperor heard from behind the screen that he didn't have time to put on his coat and shoes, so he ran out in his underwear and socks, and said with a sullen face, "Zhou Man, what's the matter with the Minister of the Humorous? See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2634. Man Bao was taken aback by the emperor's face, and he quickly lowered his head and said, "Your Majesty, Lord Wei is ill." Wei Ji, however, put down his sleeves, tidied up slightly, and saluted, "Your Majesty, this minister is fine. If Lord Zhou is concerned, it will be messed up." Man Bao frowned slightly, raised her head to speak, and caught a glimpse of Lord Wei's warning gaze. She paused for a moment, and then paused for a while. "Just got today's new booklet." Bai Shan, who was sorting the side hall, heard that something was wrong, so he picked up the 2 more important booklet that he had just returned, and looked for it, just in time to see the emperor running out barefoot. He also saw Wei Ji's gaze, and after a pause, he stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, this is a dispatch from Yingzhou, saying that there was a conflict between Goguryeo and Silla, and one of Goguryeu's troops entered Yingzhou, harassing the local people." The emperor's ugly face softened a little. He sat on the dragon chair and said with a sullen face, "Bring the book up." Bai Shan presented a booklet in his hand. Gu Zhong hurriedly took out his shoes and clothes from behind. He squatted down and put on the shoes for the emperor before putting on one shoe. When he was about to wear the other, the emperor was so angry that he threw the folds out and put them on with a kick of his foot. Half of his shoes were kicked away, and he said angrily, "What are you wearing in the heat? Get off." Gu Zhong knelt on the ground, didn't dare to say a word, hugged his clothes and hunched back. The emperor sat on the dragon chair with his face as black as a pot, wearing no coat and only one shoe, but Li Shangshu, who was very disciplined, didn't open his mouth. Even Wei Ji, who was always restrained and respectful, should not see the disheveled clothes? The emperor took his seat. Man Bao saw the book that fell to his feet. Seeing that Guzhong, sweating profusely, was about to come forward to take it, he bent down to pick up the book and handed it to Bai Shan seemingly casually. Bai Shan. He raised his eyes and looked at Man Bao, who gave a wink. Bai Shan reached out and took it, raised her eyebrows at her. You owe me a favor. Man Bao lowered his eyes slightly. Go, pay you back another day. Bai Shan took the book and handed it back to the emperor. He bowed slightly and said, Your Majesty, the governor of Yingzhou requested to send troops to Goguryeo. This matter is very important, and the Ministry of War will submit it directly. Do you think the Ministry of Recruitment needs to come over to discuss the matter? The Duke of Zhao was guarding the capital, and only a servant from the Ministry of War followed. The emperor turned over the book with a sullen face, and said solemnly, Come on. Yes. Bai Shan immediately bowed and stepped back, pulling her slightly when passing by Zhou Man. Man Bao could only saluted at the top and left with the medicine box in his hand. As soon as she left, although the atmosphere was still a little stagnant, it was not as tense as before. Guzhong lowered his eyes and breathed a sigh of relief. After a while, the right servant of the Ministry of War came in with Bai Shan, and everyone discussed the book, and the atmosphere became relaxed. Except for the emperor, who was still barefoot and looked a little sloppy in his underwear, this court meeting was different from previous ones. Too big a difference. The poor right servant of the Ministry of War joined in the middle of the process, and had no idea what was going on, but when he saw the emperor like this, he knew that he had lost his temper, so he didn't dare to say a single extra sentence. The emperor felt that he could not answer anything when asked, so he was so angry that he stood up with one foot bare, and pointed at him and scolded him. Yes, for ministers in the DPRK, he cannot scold people for no reason, but he can scold people for reasons. Who is afraid of whom? The right servant of the Ministry of War wiped his face and almost couldn't help but resign from his temper, but he still held back after thinking about it. Forget it, today the emperor has a big temper, and he doesn't have the same knowledge as him. Wei Ji sighed when he saw it, and had to interrupt the emperor's words to speak for the Ministry of War. The temperament of the capable courtiers will not be too small. If you continue to scold, the emperor may really have to find another right servant of the Ministry of War. Everyone is not short of royal salaries, and they are not poor families. They are obsessed with fame, so they really put aside fame and fortune, and they are not doing well. Everyone should write to resign and go to work. How difficult is it? There are many people who are reluctant to resign like Wei Ji, but there are also people who are more at ease like Duke Yuxian. Unfortunately, the current right waiter is a little at ease. He can sneak away to grab a jar of good wine. People who leave the office early. Man Bao walked out of the Hall of Longevity, thought about it with the medicine box, then turned around and went to the office of the Taiyuan Hospital below. Opening the door, Imperial Physician Zheng was dispensing medicine, and when he saw her coming, he got up and saluted, Dr. Zhou, you are finally here. Many nobles suffered from heat stroke yesterday, and they were greedy for cold last night, so a lot of people fell ill. Man Bao asked, is it serious? It's not serious, it just needs to be prescribed some medicine. The manpower we bring is limited. Please help. Man Bao nodded, put down the medicine box, and took the pulse record he wrote down with Imperial Physician Zheng to get medicine, and asked, when was the last time Your Majesty asked for a pulse? Is Xiao Yuan also going? Imperial Physician Zheng thought for a while and said, it was Imperial Physician Lu who went. 5 days ago, no, it seemed like 7 days ago. Isn't Your Majesty asking for pulse every 3 days? Zheng Tai said, what can you do if Your Majesty is not happy? He said, Your Majesty has been very irritable recently. Xiao Yuan is saying that it is hot and hot, and Jiangyi is indeed suffering from drought. I heard that there is a lot of rain in the south of the Yangtze River, and several rivers have been washed away. Xiao Yuanzheng and Imperial Physician Lu have already instructed the Imperial Kitchen to cook the summer sour soup for His Majesty. Man Bao pouted and said, "That soup isn't good at all, it's not as good as sour plum soup. If it were me, I'd rather not drink it." Speaking of which, she paused slightly, the Emperor wouldn't stop drinking because of this, right? Imperial Physician Zheng asked, "Did you come down from your Highness Changshao just now? What happened to your Majesty?" "It's heat stroke," Man Bao said sullenly, "but the one with the most serious problem is Lord Wei." She asked, "Is there no one to invite Master Wei's ping in line?" Zheng Tai said, "It depends on the situation. Generally speaking, adults like Wei adults, our Thai hospital is invited once a month, but sometimes we are busy, sometimes they are busy, they are not sick, do not call, naturally, we won't be bothered, but we usually ask for a pulse every 6 months. After thinking about it, he said, Lord Wei's last call for pulse seems to have been years ago. Man Bao asked, "Who asked for it?" Me. Imperial Physician Zheng looked at her, "What's the matter, what's wrong with Mr. Wei?" Man Bao sighed, "Master Wei's health is not good." Dr. Zheng was startled. Man Bao and Imperial Physician Zheng took good care of the medicine that the nobles needed. In fact, the cold evil is still on the outside, so it is not difficult to treat. After thinking for a while, Man Bao said, "Tell the people who come to receive the medicine to pay attention to their diet. For the past 2 days, the diet will be light and the palace will be cool. After using the medicine, the heat in the body will dissipate within 2 days." Imperial Physician Zheng responded. Man Bao thoughtfully went to prepare the medicinal moxibustion to be used by the emperor, while Imperial Physician Zheng sat in a daze. "I took the pulse a few years ago. Although Mr. Wei is a little overworked, it's not bad, right?" Man Baodao, "It might be nothing at that time, but after a long period of overwork, it will get worse at a certain point. This year is not very smooth. Since the beginning of the spring, all kinds of things have been going on, and the mind has been exhausted." Imperial Physician Zheng was distressed. "Your Majesty will call me to wait, right? Lord Zhou, do you have a cure?" Man Bao nodded and said, "Yes." Zheng Tai's eyes brightened, and Man Bao said, "Master Wei puts down his political affairs and starts to recuperate from this moment. It is possible for him to recover after 2 or 3 years of recuperation. See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2635. The light in the eyes of Imperial Physician Zheng went out. Isn't this the equivalent of resigning from the official position? Not to mention whether the emperor is willing or not, Wei Ji is afraid that he is also not willing? He shook his head and sighed, leaving the matter behind. Man Bao sat in a chair and pondered. The illness came like a mountain, and the illness went away like a thread. Especially, Wei Ji, who was suffering from labor and illness, needed to recuperate. If he can't rest. Man Bao pondered, how should she treat it? Before he could come up with a clue, Eunuch Gu personally came over to invite Man Bao to the Hall of Longevity. He looked around, leaned forward and whispered, "My master said that your Majesty is in a very bad mood today, and he didn't mention that he was sick. I need to rest, and everyone has been scolded several times today for not responding well. Now all the adults are gone, and His Majesty is only left with Lord Wei. The two of them are going to have lunch, but they just want to wait for Imperial Dr. Zhou to see them before eating." Man Bao expressed his understanding and thanked him for the reminder. The little father-in-law Gu said in a low voice, "The servants still want to thank Lord Zhou. Today, thanks to Lord Zhou for rescuing the siege, otherwise my master would have been scolded." Man Bao whispered, "It was Lord Bai who solved the siege, and he should be thanked." "Yes, Master Bai wants to thank you, but Master Zhou also wants to thank you. Man Bao carried the medicine box to the Hall of Longevity. The emperor had already put on his clothes and shoes, and was sitting at the table playing chess with Wei Ji. Wei Ji didn't know how to make people, and his chess skills were slightly better than Bai Shan's, so the emperor was very unhappy. Seeing Zhou Man, the emperor who was about to lose immediately dropped his pieces and messed up a game of chess. He knew to Wei, let Zhou Qing show Wei Qing a look first. Wei Ji glanced at the chessboard, put down the pieces, and smiled at Zhou Man. Gu Zhong immediately took the servant forward to put away the chessboard and tidied up the table. Man Bao stepped forward to open the medicine box, took out the pulse pillow and put it on the table. Wei Ji pulled up his sleeve and put his hand on the pulse pillow. Man Bao put his fingers on his pulse, lowered his eyes and listened carefully to the pulse. After a long while, she raised her head and asked, "Is there anything you feel uncomfortable with, my lord?" Wei Ji smiled and shook his head, "There is no discomfort." Man Bao looked at his face, the cyan in his eyes, and the sag of his shoulders and elbows. Man Bao carefully recalled the Master Wei he had seen over the past year. She has a good memory and is an imperial physician, and she is best at looking at sex. Speaking of which, Mr. Wei has changed a lot in the past year or so. Man Bao's eyes swept through the white hair on his temples, and then looked at his face. Wei's height was younger than her husband, but his face was not as moist and red as that of Mr. Zhuang. Well, her husband's health seems to be getting better and better over the past few years, and it is not worse than when she was a child, so the human body is strange, it can age before getting old, or it can have a youthful appearance. The emperor waited anxiously, but seeing Zhou Man staring straight at Wei Ji with his round eyes, he waited patiently. After waiting for a while, she didn't move, and the emperor couldn't help but turn his head and stare at Wei Ji's face. Wei Zii, who has never changed his color since Mount Tai collapsed, turned his eyes a little uncomfortably, and wanted to withdraw his hand, but Zhou Menyi pressed him down, so he could only honestly not move. The emperor looked at Wei Ji, then turned to look at Zhou Man, and couldn't help but sneered in his heart. If Wei Ji was not a bad old man of his age, he would almost think that Zhou Man was looking at him by looking at him like that. The emperor pondered for a while and felt that he needed a beautiful young man to keep his eyes peeled. Oh, no, it was a beautiful young man, so he turned to look at Gu Zhong and instructed, Bai Shiren is still in the Hall of Longevity, call him. Wei Ji. Man Bao finally recalled Wei Ji who he saw at the last court meeting, and after retracting his hand, he couldn't help rubbing his chin, Master Wei, do you have a sore back? It's unbearable when you sit for more than 2/4 of an hour. Wei Ji smiled slightly, and was about to say no when Man Bao suddenly said, Master Wei, diagnosis is the most basic ability to be an imperial physician. If I'm not sure about this, then I don't need to be an imperial physician. So are you sure you want me to be unprofessional? Wei Ji was choked. Man Bao continued, you just need to tell the truth, and I can make a diagnosis. The emperor immediately returned to his senses, and Wei knew, Wei Qing, I can't live without you, but it is not in this way of misdiagnosing. You should tell Zhou Man truthfully, and you should not be afraid of the disease. He paused and said, this is what Wei Qing advised me to do. You must do it yourself, otherwise why would you advise me? Wei Ji finally sighed and nodded with Zhou Man. Man Bao immediately asked, what else is uncomfortable? It's just a little sore, and there is no other discomfort. Seeing Zhou Man's disbelief, he assured, what I said is true, and I never took this soreness into my heart. When you get older, there will always be some problems with people. Man Bao simply asked, did you sleep well at night? Wei Ji, it's okay. How many hours do you usually sleep at night? Well, when did you fall asleep last night? When did you get up? You can wake up and wake up in the night. The question is carefully and carefully, just like the criminal department is interrogating prisoners. Wei Ji opened his mouth, but answered honestly under the gaze of the emperor. Man Bao asked about sleep, diet, and energy during the day. The emperor on the side was silent. Wei Ji's daily life is actually similar to the emperor's, but the emperor occasionally goes to the 11 Niiwen to see the imperial army. He can move his body to some extent. In addition, he is playful by nature, and he always plays with the needle. Unlike Wei Ji, then it's like sleeping and thinking about state affairs, and waking up and thinking about state affairs. As Zhou Man said, the spirit of man is blood and essence, so it hurt so much that the emperor would not believe that Wei Ji was not sick. He has been busy since the beginning of the spring, and now he wants to pretend to be sick for 2 days to save others. He feels that Wei Ji is too tired. Man Bao went through Wei Ji's pulse case again in his heart, and then sighed, "How will your majesty and Lord Wei deal with it?" The emperor frowned and looked at her, "You are an imperial physician, but you are asking me how to treat it." Man Bao is not a fool. This morning Wei Ji glared at her, and Bai Shan helped her out. She realized that Wei Ji was afraid that he would not want to rest and recuperate, and even the emperor might not be willing, so he said, "As an imperial physician, the minister's suggestion is to rest in peace, and slowly recuperate in the past 2 or 3 years, and it may be cured." Wei Ji immediately said to the emperor, "Your Majesty, this minister does not feel unwell. This is his attitude." The emperor also pondered. After a while, he saw Bai Shan who had come by the order, so he got up and said, "Bai Sharan, you came just in time. Today, let me show you Master Wei's chess skills. Come here for the next game." So he asked Bai Shan and Wei Ji to play chess, and he led Zhou Man away. Wei Ji and Bai Shan. This is a gift from God. Man Bao accepted it well, and followed the emperor with the medicine box. See you at 6 p.m.